In this video, I want to show you how we install Kali Linux. So the first step would be to go to a browser and search for Kali Linux, which I'll do that now. So let me go to a browser quickly. And once I'm in the browser, I'll type in Kali Linux. And now we'll search for Kali Linux. And you'll notice the first link here is the kali.org. I'll go there. And notice that this Kali Linux is based on Linux, but is having many security pre-built functions and pre-built add-ons already included within the Linux package. So it is built for security professionals or anyone wanting to test out security. Let's go to the download link. And you'll notice that there are many image files for Kali Linux, the 32-bit, the 64-bit. We want to go for the 64-bit, which is about 3.1 gigabyte. So I'll just click on that and that will start downloading. It's going to take a little while to download. So while it's downloading, I'm going to pause this particular video and then get back to you in the next video and show you exactly how to install it. So now we've managed to download the Kali Linux ISO file and we need to start installing that. So what we need to do is in our VirtualBox environment, we need to start creating a new operating system, a virtual operating system within VirtualBox. So we go to New, and once I go to New, I need to create a name and operating system. So for here, I'll type in Kali. And Kali Linux runs on either a Debian or Ubuntu Linux system. So in the type, we need to select the appropriate options. Because it is based on a Debian or Ubuntu system, we need to make sure that we're very careful in selecting one of these operating systems. So to do that, we need to make sure that we select Ubuntu or Debian. And notice I've selected Linux. Under that version, I've got Ubuntu, but also we have a Debian option here, a 64-bit Debian. But for now, I want to go with a Ubuntu 64-bit option. And I can then simply click Next to go on to the next step. Here we have the option of selecting the memory size. Now, I can select as much as I want, but for this particular exercise, I want to select 1 gigabyte RAM for this particular operating system. We have up to 8 gigabyte on this machine, but 1 gig should be sufficient for Kali Linux. Let's go next. I have the option of selecting a hard disk here. So I'll create a virtual hard disk in this particular exercise because we don't want to create a physical hard disk right now. Just create a virtual one and let's see what happens. Now we have the VDI option, which is the virtual disk image. We have the VM disk option as well, which allows you to have a VMware type operating system. And if you want to go with a Microsoft Hyper-V, you can select this option here. But for now, we want to select the VDI option and we can proceed to the next step. We want to either select a dynamic or fixed. I will choose dynamic. Now we need to allocate some hard disk space to the Kali Linux installation. It starts from about 4 gigabyte or 8 gigabyte, but we need to firstly save the new virtual hard disk file, and I want to save that in a directory called VirtualBox VMs. So I go to that particular directory, VirtualBox. Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong section here. I need to go to VirtualBox VMs. And there is a Kali directory already there. So I go in there and I save this virtual hard disk file. Once that's saved, I can now allocate the appropriate space. So it's got 8 gigabyte here. I'll change this to 20 to give it some space to use for files that are installed and any applications or any add-ons within the Kali Linux installation. And then I simply hit create, and that should create the system here. Notice now it's been created here on the left hand side. You'll see it's got 1 gig of RAM, Kali Ubuntu 64-bit operating system. It's now also has 20 gigabyte of hard disk space. The next thing we need to do is install the ISO file that we've downloaded previously. To do that, we go to the storage. Notice there's a CD icon here. I can click on that. And I need to find the image file that we downloaded previously. Let me select that file. And you'll note I've got 2 installations here. I've got a 1.07 and a 2. So 1.07 was a previous release. For this one, we will use the 2. You most likely will have 2 as well. So I click on 2 and I have this refreshed. You'll notice that it's got the location file listed there. I want to go to System and I want to select the processor from 1 to 2 processors. And then there's acceleration. I won't play around with this now. Under the execution cap, I want to leave that at 100% because Kali Linux is resource heavy, so you want to make sure it uses as much as possible. 100% is probably better to leave at that rate. It won't slow you down, don't worry, but just give it as much as you want. Network, we'll use the NAT for now. Later on, we'll show you how to use another Ethernet cable and things like that. But for now, we click on OK, and that's been done. Now we want to begin the actual installation process of Kali Linux. To do that, I click on Start, and you'll notice that a pop-up box appears with the Kali Linux installation process within the screen. Here we go. Now if I click the mouse in here, it takes over that particular machine, so I can use the mouse within that. If I then want to go out of this and go to the host machine, I need to press the right control key to get back to the VM virtual box itself. So now I'll just click on Capture. I have the option here of selecting live or install. If I just want to test it out, I'd click on live. But because we're actually installing this operating system, I'll click on install, and that will begin the installation process. So let's go through some of the options here. While this is installing, it's going to ask me to select the language. I will select English. Obviously, you can select whatever language that you're comfortable with. But for now, just click on English. I can select the region. Obviously, whichever region you are in, you'd select that. Right now, I'll select United States. Or pretty much any country. Wherever you are, select the country you are closest to. Key map. I'll just select American. That's fine. And that will install a few more things. And we'll just wait now while the installation process runs through. There will be some options for some more settings, but that's the basic setup is happening as we speak. And I'll just wait while this loads up. This is installing on a virtual machine. So let's just go through this. Now I have the option of selecting a host name. It's got Kali as the host name. I can obviously change that if I want to. But for right now, it's fine. Kali is perfectly okay. You select whatever is perfect for you. And then I hit continue. Now, as we go through, we need to select a domain name. We obviously don't have a domain name at this point, so we need to create a domain name. It doesn't have to be anything specific. It can be very generic. So you think of what's useful for you. I'm just going to type in test.local, and that will be what I use for configuring this particular network. I hit continue, and now we get to a password, the root password. You will pick a password that you're going to remember easily, and make sure you write it down somewhere safe so you can come back to it. I'll just type in a password here, and the next step allows me to verify this password. Once I verify this password, it allows me to configure the clock. Obviously, because I selected US time, I can select any of these options. You can come back and change this later on. I'm just going to continue for now. And the next step will be a very important step of the whole process. This is where you partition the hard disk. Now, if you at home don't have a virtual box and are going to use it to dual boot your Windows and another operating system like Kali Linux, you need to be very careful. Because we're using a virtual box, I could use a guided setup, but because I want to show you what would happen if you were doing this at home, I need to go to manual so I can show you how dual boot is possible. So I click on manual here, and that will allow you to do the same at home so you can dual boot different operating systems. Let's go into manual now, and the next step would be to actually partition the hard drive. Now, with that being selected, let's go to the partition mode. I could select any of these options here. Let me just see which one. I'm going to select the middle option here. Just click continue, and that will take me to actually start creating the partition. So create new empty partition table. Yes, I need to click on yes here so I can start creating a new partition table. Now it allows me to select the device where I want to do the partition. I've got 21.5 gigabyte available here on the virtual box. I'm just going to click on this and create a new partition. Now to create a new partition, I can create a 500 megabyte partition on this. This 500 megabyte partition is the boot partition, being the first partition, so it has the boot information to actually system to use and boot up the system correctly. So I select 500 megabyte, doesn't have to be huge, and I click on continue. We'll select primary at this point because operating systems that need a boot drive will need a primary partition setup so that it can boot from that drive. We will select the beginning here, and in here I'm going to select, I think I'll select ext3. I'll explain that in a second. I go to mount point as boot. The rest seems pretty much okay. I'm done setting up the partition, but ext3, older operating systems will have difficulty understanding ext4. The BIOS will have difficulty understanding the ext4. So if you've got an older operating system, it's best to use ext3. If you've got a new operating system, you're more than welcome to use ext4. For now, I'll just use ext3, and I'm done setting up this partition, so I can then move on to the next step. So I click on done setting up the partition. Now we move on to the next step. And here we notice that we've got two partitions. We've got a primary partition of just under 500 megabyte, and we've got this other partition which has 21 gigabyte here. So what we need to do now is create another partition which will be the swap partition. So we do that by going in here and creating that, and this will allow, if the RAM gets a bit low, we can then use the swap partition to allocate some of the RAM to and allow the system to be more stable and not run out of memory. So we create another primary partition here. We go into we want to go and set this as a swap partition. So let me just see where that setting is. Let me go into this ext4 journaling file system and make sure I think I'm in the wrong section. So let me just go back out of this for a second and go into the ext3. Yep, here we are, swap area. I want to create this as a swap area. So this enables that RAM usage if needed, to make sure there is a buffer of RAM in the swap area. So I go on and create this. So now you'll see there are 3 partitions. There's 2 primary partitions, one being a boot area, one being the swap area, and the third area is the free space where the data will be located. So I'll just click on this for a second and just make sure that's going to be where all the data is. You'll notice that I need to partition this as well. So create this third partition, which will be 17 gigabytes. Create that as primary as well. And I go in here, I'll select this as ext4. The boot area was ext3. The mount point is fine. All the rest of the settings is fine. And I can go into done setting up the partition. And once I save this, I can now go to 3 partitions: boot area, swap area, and the free space area. And if I go to finish partitioning and write changes to disk, this will allow me to confirm that. I click on yes. Once I click yes, this will start creating the 3 partitions and start installing the Kali Linux system. So while this installation is going, this might take a little bit of a while. That means we've partitioned our hard drives correctly. We've got the 3 partitions: a boot area, a swap area, and a free space area. And I will let this Kali Linux install, and we will see you in the next video. We are getting to the end of the Kali Linux installation, but for now it's asking us if we want to use a network mirror. The network mirror is if you wanted any additional packages, but for right now we don't seem to need any of that, so we can simply click no here. So let me just select no so we can go to the next step to finalize the installation. Now you'll notice that it's doing some more installation. This should take a little while. I just wanted to walk you through the last step so you get an idea of how the installation is going to work on your particular installation setup there. Now we are given this option of a grub bootloader. We want to use this bootloader to enable us to boot our operating system properly. So for now, we need to select yes and install the grub bootloader. And let's go to the next step. Now it's asking us for the device. Well, we've only got one partition, which is this one. So we select that and we hit the installation. Now it's running the grub install or installing the grub install on the boot drive. And now it's just doing the finalizing of the installation, disabling a few different things here, and shortly it will then finish, and then we'll reboot the system and we will see the Kali Linux default sign-on page. This should take a few minutes, but I'll walk you through exactly what you're going to see when you're finalizing your installation of Kali Linux as well. This does take a short while, but you just have to be patient. And I'm letting this run. I didn't show you the previous installation because that would have taken too long, but for this I just want you to see how this will end up. Now notice that it says installation is complete. I can simply hit continue to reboot the system. Once I click continue, that will just close this window and we'll start the final steps of installation, which is removing some remote live packages. So removes that, and then we'll reboot the system. And then we'll see the Kali Linux installation page or sign-on page. And from there, you'll use the root username that we created earlier and the password that you set up. So make sure you keep that username and password safe because you will be needing it. So here we are. It's rebooted. Now we have the option of selecting the Kali Linux. So we click on that. And notice this starts loading. Let's just make sure this is all loading okay. Looks okay so far. It is booting. We want to make sure it recognizes our keyboard and mouse shortly. Yep, keyboard and mouse have been recognized. And now we should see the Kali Linux startup page shortly. I'll just resize this so you get a better idea of what this looks like. And this will be similar to what you see on your screen as well. Just give this a few moments. Let's widen this for you. And there we go. We now have the startup page where you will put your username, which would be root, and the password that you set up earlier. So make sure you keep that username and password secure and safe so that you'll be able to log in easily without much headache and without much fuss.